Your reflective log is a key element of your assessment for this course, and it needs to reflect 12 hours of work, which means it needs taking seriously. Reflective practice is big business as well as being big in business. Now, many years ago when I began teaching, reflective practice tended to be reserved for subjects that dealt openly with personal emotions and was often rooted in the notions of self-actualization developed by key figures like Abraham Maslow. Now, according to Maslow, our needs can be seen on a hierarchical scale. We need food, drink and sleep, yes, but these needs are lower than the more advanced needs that we have for a sense of belonging, for love, and ultimately self-actualization. Of course, the reality is that being reflective is an essential element of our personal, academic and professional development. To be reflective is to essentially think about our own thoughts, our own actions, and to employ reflective skills like this is now broadly agreed as essential for anyone wishing to equip themselves for the future workforce. It is through reflecting on ourselves that we learn to identify those skills we need for any given task, and it's through reflecting on our experiences that we learn what practices to employ and what to avoid. It's through reflecting on our environment that we learn to recognize what each situation requires and enable ourselves to perform in an ever-changing world. But how does it work? Well, actually, it's quite simple. It can be boiled down to a few key processes. The first is that you ask yourself some basic questions. What did you need to do? And how does it relate to your goals? Why did you do it that way? Or why did people react in that way? Did my actions work? Or what were the consequences of those actions? And how could I do it better next time? Once you've answered those basic questions comes the second and trickier part of the process, because now you have to actually do something with your answers. So let's think about this more specifically in terms of your progress through this or any other course of study. Each week you know that there are certain things expected of you. Things that are expected of you in order that you might achieve your final aim, which is to succeed. So question 1. What is expected of you this week? And how will that help you towards your final goal? The first part of this question is easy enough because it will normally appear in your course guide or be listed in the outcomes for each week. The second part you might have to think a bit about for yourself. How will those outcomes help you achieve your ultimate goal? Well, to know that, you've got to think about what your ultimate goal is. On the one hand, you've got an immediate short-term goal, which is to pass the course. And to do that, you need to learn specific things. So to begin with, you need to find a way in which you can relate the outcomes of what you are learning to your assessments. Passing your assessments, though, is itself only a means to an end. It's not just getting the degree which brings you here, it's doing something with that degree, like getting a job. Not just any job. Oh no, you want more than that. You want to be successful in your work. How you define that success can differ from person to person. For one, it might be getting a high-paid job. For another, it might be getting a job that makes you happy or secure or makes you feel like you're making an impact in the world. If you don't already know what your measures of success are, then that's fine, but you might want to start thinking about it. So, your goals are, in the short term, passing your course. In the long term, they're about being successful. How does what you learn today help you with that? Okay, question 2. Why did you do the things the way you did them? For this question, you need to be completely honest with yourself, because often the answers are going to be the root of the problem that you need to address. For example, you may have answered for question 1 that you needed to read a certain chapter or complete a certain part of the assessment. And the reality might be that you didn't do either of them. That's okay, but only if you are willing to address the question of why. Why didn't you? Or maybe you did manage to do something, but very little and probably not enough. Okay, but why? Or maybe you did both the reading and the assessment, which is great. But how did you go about it? And why did you go about it that way? The key to this question is understanding why we're asking it. Having completed certain tasks or failed to complete them, we're now in the position of being able to evaluate what worked and what didn't. We're in a position to be able to recognize mistakes we might have made and put in place a plan to make sure we don't make those same mistakes again. So, you didn't manage any of the required targets. Fine. What stopped you? What were the barriers that prevented you from being effective? You managed some, but not all. Well, fine, but what enabled you to complete some tasks? And is there any way that you can use that to successfully help you complete other tasks in the future? Or you managed to complete them all. Brilliant. What made that possible? How did you do it? And is there any way that you can use that to help you complete future tasks as well? But completing tasks is only half the job. If your task is to complete a piece of assessment, it's not enough just to finish the thing, you have to pass. If your task is completion of a project in a work situation, then it's not just enough to finish the project, it has to actually be effective and achieve what it was meant to. Which brings us to question 3. Did my actions work? Or what were the consequences of those actions? Maybe you didn't complete the tasks needed, okay, but what impact does this have? Have you just deferred those tasks? You still need to complete them, but now you need to do them at the same time as you're completing the next tasks. And if so, how are you going to manage this? Or maybe you discover that there is in fact no significant impact, in which case, what does this mean for how you determine which tasks are necessary and which tasks are not in the future? Maybe you did the reading, fine, but did you understand it? Did it help? Maybe you completed the assessment task, brilliant. Was it good enough? Did it achieve what it needed to? Did it achieve your target? Maybe your target was just to pass, and you did that, in which case you've met your goal. Maybe, though, your task was to pass well, to get a good grade, and you didn't get the grade you expected. Okay, why not? Whatever the outcomes of your question 3, it's meaningless unless you do something with them, which leads us to question 4. How can you do it better next time? This is about developing your ability to articulate your own skills and abilities as well as to plan for the future. For example, you may determine that you spent too long focusing on one task and ended up with not enough time to complete the others. Now, recognizing this can be helpful because as you progress through the course, you can learn to distribute your time more effectively, allocating your time just as you might put food out on people's plates for dinners. Don't put half the food onto one of the 4 plates, and remember that some people have bigger appetites than others. In just the same way, some of the tasks you face will prove more difficult for you than others, and you may need to learn ways in which you can distribute your time, like food on plates, more appropriately to the tasks you have to manage. Alternatively, you might come to the conclusion that completing these specific tasks has already helped you to develop skills in, for example, time management, speed reading, or researching complex issues, in which case, what are you going to do to keep a permanent record of these developing skills so that you can both talk about them and demonstrate them to potential employers? In relation to question 2, maybe you've completed the tasks and worked out that there was something that you did that helped you get them done. How can you use this in the future? What are you going to do? How are you going to enhance it and make it even more likely that you will complete future tasks? Or maybe you didn't complete your tasks, but you worked out some of the things that were getting in the way, things that were stopping you from completing your tasks. What are you going to do about them? What strategies can you put in place to minimize the impact of those barriers to success in the future? Now, in relation to question 3, if something worked how are you going to take things from that experience that you can then use again in the future? If something didn't work, how are you going to make sure that you avoid making those same mistakes again? In other words, this fourth question is focusing on making sure that you make the most of the positive things about your experience and get something positive from the negative things, avoiding negative things in the future. After all, isn't that how we get better at anything?